John Mateer gives the Oklahoma Sooners an advantage in pretty much every game this season.
You are Locked On Sooners, your daily podcast on the Oklahoma Sooners. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Sooner Nation? Welcome to Locked On Sooners, and thank you for making Locked On Sooners your first listen every single day. Shout out to all the everydayers out there. We are free and available on all podcast platforms and on YouTube, so hit that subscribe button and that notification bell to let you know when new episodes drop. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com today. He's Jay Smith of Unfair Sports. I'm John Williams of Sooners Wire at USA Today Sports, and on today's show, we're going to talk more of what SEC coaches are saying down there in Destin, making some bold claims, some bold asks. Discuss that in the third segment. Did Nagy compare John Mateer to an MVP? Okay, we'll discuss that coming up here in a little bit too. But JD PicKell of On3 mentioned yesterday that Oklahoma has a quarterback advantage in 10 of 12 games on their schedule in 2025, Jay.
The interesting thing is the games that he selected as the ones that Oklahoma doesn't have the advantage, but he didn't say that it was like a massive separation. It was more of a, I'd probably give the slight edge here because of this, slight edge because of that. We'll go through each one of them. But John, it's beginning even more now. It's the hype is happening, and I don't like it. Like, I want us to be the sunshine pumpers. Let us be the one to throw the hopium out there. Let us be the dealers of this. But unfortunately, it feels like the streets are being flooded with Oklahoma hopium. It looks like there's no regulation to this drug being passed around. I am bothered by this now, John. We've got to stop this. Like, we got to flood all of these analysts and all of these people nonstop and let them know, stop talking about Oklahoma in such good graces. Stop giving Oklahoma props. Stop showing Oklahoma love. Why, John? Why, you may ask? Because they're going to make us look right. And I don't want them to be on the same train as us. Because at this point, talking about these games, John, we've talked about this a few times about the Oklahoma Sooners, especially the hopium that we have been dealing to the people. Oklahoma does have a quarterback advantage in a lot of games this year. And I think we talked about this last show, the Mainline podcast, they put a post out and they talked about John Mateer and how many players, blue chips he played with, which was 0 at Washington State. Put up some numbers and did well. Can't knock that. Coming to Oklahoma, 48 blue chips will be there. And a lot of them at this point actually have SEC experience, John. So I get why everybody's starting to deal the hopium with us. There's a distributor somewhere. We got to stop them. But at the same time, like, can you deny any of this?
You really can't. And I think that's the thing that makes people uncomfortable with Oklahoma in the offseason, because you're coming off of a 6-7 season. Why should anybody feel confident, right? That's typically the refrain that you're hearing is, why should anybody feel confident about Oklahoma when they're a 6-7 team? Well, this is not the same team that finished last year. It's a very, very different team. And predominantly on the offense, where you had to get very, very different. You had to be different going into this season. And they made enough changes on the offensive side of the ball that gives people optimism about what Oklahoma is going to be. And so, I am one of the more optimistic people that you'll find in sports talk. It's just what it is. I'm an optimistic person. Jay, right there with you. If that's not your cup of tea, I'm sorry for you.
I have a cup of tea here for you.
Yeah, I got my coffee. We're going to be optimistic. We're just going to be who we are.
Yep.
That's just what it is. We're not putting on a front. That's not what this is. We're optimistic about Oklahoma. A lot of it comes back to John Mateer. And that guy is a good football player. How good is he going to be in 2025? That's why we get to play the games. That's why we get to go week to week in the fall, and we get to evaluate these games every single week with you here on Locked On Sooners.
Yep.
We're going to find out how good he's going to be. Is he going to be a Heisman contender? Is he going to put Oklahoma into the SEC title contention? Will they be a playoff team? Will they be on the cusp of playoff success?
Yep.
It's all kind of setting up for them to do that. But as we've mentioned this week and even last week, Oklahoma's got the number one strength of schedule according to ESPN's SP+. So it's not like it's going to be an easy road for John Mateer. He's going to have to go prove it every single week out there, just like any quarterback in the SEC. Every single week, got to go prove it. But he's got the talent, he's got the mentality to go do that. And he's got some experience under his belt that shows, hey, listen, I can go compete and I can go play at a high level. And that stuff matters. Having the confidence that you can go play at a high level, knowing that you've done it before, knowing that you've picked up some big wins, that kind of stuff matters. And so when JD Pickell says that Oklahoma's got the quarterback advantage of 10 of 12 games, South Carolina and LSU being the only games he didn't feel comfortable giving Oklahoma the advantage in, I'm not going to argue with him. I can't argue with him. You look at the schedule and, yeah, I feel good about John Mateer over pretty much any quarterback. If there's one that's maybe a bigger question mark, it's the Texas game with Arch Manning. But again, that's all based on projection of what everybody thinks Arch Manning is going to be, not what we know Arch Manning yet to be.
Yeah, let's go ahead and look at the games here. Let's start with the first one, Illinois State.
Yes.
Should we actually do that game? No, we shouldn't. Stop being ridiculous, Jay. That there's no reason to even go there. Because they actually have a whole bunch of changes that happen at that school. Michigan's next. Underwood. Would you take a freshman over John Mateer? Absolutely not. We would not do that. We have a quarterback that's been in the system for 3 years. Let's not be ridiculous here.
Ask me that question in November.
Yeah,
let
exactly.
Bryce Underwood play some games, not making his second road start.
And that was the same way I felt about Nico Iamaleava. I said, starting in the year, early, it was good for Oklahoma to have him early. You kind of saw in the way the game went, Oklahoma could have won the game if you had a offense with the pulse and you weren't turning the ball over right after you get a turnover. But later in the season, you start to see a little bit of a development out of him. Now, it wasn't where we thought it was going to be, but that's my thing. Same thing with Bryce Underwood. Come talk to me the 1st of November. I bet you I have a completely different thought process on him in comparison. Need that experience. Traveling to Temple. We're not going to do Temple. They just fired their coach right at the end of, I think, January. And so now they're completely new. Auburn, Jackson Arnold or Deuce Knight over John Mateer? Absolutely not. Neither. So we're good there. Kent State, once again, we're not going to go there. They're considered one of the worst teams in college football right now. Texas is the interesting one, John, because I think Arch Manning has the potential of being really, really good. He may even be great, but like you mentioned, we ain't really seen much of him. So, like 20-something snaps? 19 snaps? Can you talk me into Arch Manning today?
I can't talk you into Arch Manning today, and I'm not going to do that on Locked On Sooners. I'll let Locked On Longhorns do that. You can go listen to their show. I'll let Spencer McLaughlin of Locked On College Football go do that because I'm sure he'd want to. But no, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to pick Arch Manning over John Mateer. If you want to tell me it's a push, I'll let you have that. I'm not going to argue that one for you. But right now, I believe John Mateer to be the better quarterback. Again, we'll ask this question again come October. When we get ready to play OU Texas, we'll ask the question, who's the better quarterback? We'll have a whole lot more information at that point. But then continuing down the list, after Texas, you have South Carolina. And that one, listen, you can say Lenora Sellers is a better quarterback. I'm not going to argue with you if you want. Austin Simmons at Ole Miss. Everybody's really, really high on Austin Simmons. Like everybody else that's young on this list that we're talking through, hasn't done it yet. Joey Aguilar. I know, Jay, you're very high on Joey Aguilar at Tennessee. Again,
very high.
He's going to have to go show something a little bit, not having spring ball to work with.
Right.
Alabama's got a quarterback. Go ahead.
Oh, I'm going to say, you're right. That's the thing with Joey Aguilar for me is until we see him actually run the system, he didn't have spring, so he's got the summer, and he's going to basically have to take the first month and a half to really get it down. But, of course, Heupel system is heavy run. So, depending on the run game, we'll see if they replace Dylan Sampson, which they probably did not yet. It's going to take time. That's the big question. But, yeah, that's where Tennessee is. By November, we'll know if there'll be truly a challenge. That's you'll just like we said about Underwood, similar to Aguilar. Once he's in the system, I think he'll be better next year for Tennessee, but this year, 100% John Mateer. But then, like you said, Alabama. Ty Simpson is the starting quarterback right now. That's what it sounds like from Kalen DeBoer. Do we trust Simpson, even though he has like 4 snaps against Oklahoma in the SEC so far? Is that who we're going to pick over John Mateer?
Yeah, not yet. No. Again, we'll rediscuss these questions when we get closer to these games, but right now, no. Drew Pribula, again, a guy that's got big upside. He's got big time potential. Hasn't started much or hasn't played a whole lot. And then it comes down to Garrett Nussmeier at LSU. He's one of my favorite quarterbacks in college football going into the season. He's a legit Heisman contender right up there with Arch Manning, getting a lot of love from the sports books. But yeah, I mean, Garrett Nussmeier is the one that I feel very confident that, hey, I'd put him above John Mateer right now.
Yeah.
Again, when we get to November and we have a lot more data to go on, that could change. But right now, as we sit here on May 29, yeah, I'll take Garrett Nussmeier over John Mateer right now. But again, that could change once John Mateer goes and plays some SEC competition.
I feel like he's being disrespected, though. Nussmeier is definitely, I mean, he's threw for 4,000 yards in the SEC, folks. What are we doing here? Why are we pretending like this dude has not actually put up SEC numbers? Out of anybody on here, though, the only disagreement I would go with JD Piquel on is probably Lenore Sellers.
Okay.
So I think Lenore Sellers is very talented. I don't know about him as really a passer yet. He's still young. That's the good thing, is he's still young. He's developing. Now that everybody has film on him, what does he look like next season? Yeah. If he looks better with the film in the beginning of the year, I have no problem with Egan Crow. But I do think that with John Mateer, everybody's got his film, but they've got to actually see him on the field now. And I think him coming from, with his OC, he's going to be a big time surprise for a lot of teams in the SEC.
Yeah, I don't think John Mateer is going to sneak up on a lot of people. I think people are going to be getting what they expect. And that's a guy that can make a lot of plays through the air, make a lot of plays on the ground, but he's going to frustrate a lot of people because they're going to think that they've got to, hemmed in the pocket, and then he's gone. But Jim Nagy made a bold claim about John Mateer, comparing him to an MVP. Let's discuss that coming up next here on Locked On Sooners.
The NBA playoffs are in full swing, and every night delivers highlight-worthy performances, major momentum shifts, and can't-miss moments. Whether it's a game-winning shot or a breakout player, there's never been a better time to get in on the action. FanDuel makes it easy to stay in the game before tip-off and live with player props, performance trends, and same-game parlays. Fans have more ways than ever to play smart and win big, like right now. Told y'all my picks on the NBA yesterday. We had Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Jalen Williams, all going over 25 points. You had a little bit of Anthony Edwards, who gave us over 20. Numbers look good, right? I'm looking at this Pacers game. The Knicks at -4 is probably one I would jump on. If you want to build a parlay out of that, why not go plus 20 on like Jalen Brunson with Pascal Siakam as well as Karl Anthony Towns? Would be a fun mix. You can do that. Best part is you can get a $200 bonus bet if your first $5 bet hits. So put 5 on the Knicks to cover the spread, or the Pacers, whoever you're riding with. Good chance you can get yourself $200. So if you're new to FanDuel, it's the perfect time to sign up. Head to FanDuel.com. Place your first $5 bet. If it wins, you'll get $200 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA.
Thanks again for making Locked On Sooners your first listen every single day. Shout out to all the everydayers out there tuning in and subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Jay, congrats to the Oklahoma City Thunder making the NBA. Oh my gosh, I cannot talk. The NBA Finals.
Yes, sir.
After beating the Minnesota Timberwolves on Thursday night. What was the atmosphere like? You were at that game.
Oh, it was ridiculous. I'm still running off adrenaline right now. Shout out to our guy Rylan Styles over there at Locked On Thunder. Go listen to him. He lost his mind as well on his show right afterwards because, hey, we're going back to the finals for the first time in 13 years. So the drought is done. We're in there. And yeah, shout out to FanDuel. That -8.5 they had for the Thunder yesterday. Cha-ching. Moneyball.
Yeah. So after the game, Jim Nagy, posted a quote from Mark Dageneau after the game. He said, "These guys are uncommon. They do everything right. They're professional. They're high character. They're competitive. And most of all, they're team first. They embody everything it means to be a team." And he said, "This is the blueprint for Oklahoma football." And then Realistic OU fan responded on Twitter saying, "It also helps to have the league MVP. Jim Nagy said very plainly, we have John Mateer."
John, is it a shock that a guy that, scouts kids for NFL talent in preparation for the Senior Bowl to head them to the NFL draft looks at the quarterback at the team that he now works for and says, "Yep, we got a good one here"? I'm not surprised, because it's funny that the one thing, if you recognize this, a lot of people didn't see this, and this is no shade to anybody on the roster today. I'm just pointing out something factual. Jim Nagy got in here, took this job, and what was his biggest pickup, like literally right after he got here? It was a player that he was raving about for a couple years, and one that he actually expected to potentially be in the Senior Bowl. It's Jay Knott. Mm-hmm. Our running back room was a little bit on the struggle bus. And it was more so because we got a lot of young players, dealt with a lot of injuries, a lot of shuffling. But the first big thing he came in and did was like, we probably need to add a veteran. 1-year dude, rental, that's put up some numbers, get him in here. We can produce, and the young guys can continue to develop like we need them to. He assessed the roster and recognized, now we need a running back. He didn't say that about quarterback. He saw the quarterback that we have, and he said, I think we're good. I think we're good. I think we got him. I think we got Hawkins. We need to add somebody behind him, with a little bit of experience, just so that we have the extra body just in case. And boom, you did that. I think that he is saying here that John Mateer could potentially be like MVP Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and be one of the top dudes. John, I did a video recently about how John Mateer could be in the MVP conversation over on my channel, Unfair Sports. And I got a lot of flack for it. People were like, hey, there's ways in the game to play. Blah, 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 blah. It's offseason, people. We're looking at the potential and what's there. And John, is there anything that sounds ridiculous about John Mateer potentially being a Heisman candidate if he shows out in that Michigan game?
Oh, not at all. There's nothing ridiculous about.
So, verdict is done.
Oklahoma, your Heisman you, your quarterback you, the expectations are relatively low for Oklahoma. So if Oklahoma goes and they're flirting with 10 wins this season and John Mateer puts up big numbers, then he's going to be in the Heisman conversation 100%, especially in a year like this when a lot of it is based on projection. Outside of Garrett Nussmeier, a lot of the guys that are going to be Heisman consideration are a lot of it based on projection. Now you have the Jeremiah Smiths and the Jeremiah Love up there at Notre Dame, Jeremiah Smith at Ohio State. Ryan Williams is going to be in the discussion as well at Alabama. But outside of that, I mean, all those veteran quarterbacks that were a part of the Heisman race last year are gone. And so you're going to have a pretty wide open race outside of Nussmeier and Arch that'll be in the conversation as long as they produce and those teams win games. But if Oklahoma wins a bunch of games and they get to November and they're sitting at something like 8-1 or 7-1 going into the final 4 games of the season, he's very much going to be in the Heisman discussion because he'll be a big reason why Oklahoma's had so much success. And so comparing him to, and even just not winning trophies, not winning awards, but if you're saying that John Mateer is right now the MVP of this team, it's hard to disagree with that even before he plays games, because it seems like it's restored the confidence that people have in Oklahoma football from a local to a national perspective. One player, and maybe the offensive coordinators had something to do with this as well, but getting John Mateer here has kind of flipped the narrative a little bit about Oklahoma. Now it's a matter of, well, dang, that schedule's so tough. Will they win enough games? The talent is not in dispute on this roster. Now it's just more about, can they navigate what's going to be a brutal schedule? But if you're telling me that John Mateer is Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, and I'm sure Jim Nagy is talking not just from a talent perspective, but just from what they mean as a teammate, as a person, as a leader as well. I'm here for it, man, because everybody's raved about who John Mateer has been for this program for the last 5-6 months since he arrived in Norman.
He's been the talk of the town. He's been and rightfully so. He's a quarterback. That's exactly the person that you should be talking up and speaking up about, especially when you had, mediocre quarterback play last year. You had very young quarterbacks trying to figure it out on the spot with everything around them falling apart. So not too much fault to them. It's just the circumstance was not very good. So, of course, at a school that had 2 players win the Heisman back-to-back at quarterback and a third dude that was like number 2 in Heisman votes and only lost out because the guy in front of him was like having an absurdly good season. I mean, Hurts, 4,000 yards and 1,200 yards rushing. I mean, typically that's Heisman numbers.
That's winning a Heisman any other year.
Any other year, he wins the Heisman. That's 3 in a row. But unfortunately, the things happen. But
Joe Burrow just decided to get historic on us.
He decided to go Super Saiyan on everybody, and it was not fair. Actually, he went level 2. But that's another discussion for another day. Your quarterback is the most critical component of your success, especially in college football, especially in the SEC. Actually, just in football in general. It's a rarity that you can go out and win. I mean, we did see that for 2 years in theory with Georgia, where they were able to win championships, quote unquote, despite their quarterback. It's no shade to Stetson Bennett. I think he was a really good quarterback, but he was walk-on twice for a reason. And so, but he went out there and showed out. But the thing for him was his confidence levels could be completely raised because his defense was forging him in fire. He was learning from the defense. He had the best defense in college football, and he basically understood, okay, this is the things I need to adjust because my defense is so good. Other teams are probably not going to see it the same way they do. John Mateer is playing against one of the top defenses in college football. Argue with your mama about that. Please show me how the numbers don't show you that component. We know that Oklahoma has one of the best defenses in college football. That, to me, is a fact. And you do lose a drill sergeant there with Danny Stutzman, who was one of your major leaders, and a Billy Bowman, but they taught the guys behind them very well. And I think you're going to see an uprising from them to where they can fill those shoes, and with an offense that won't force them to play all the time, may actually make the defense better. Just remember, I've quoted this numerous times. The defense should be better statistically this year than last year because of the offense, John. So, with all of that together, there's a reason why you're going to be talking quarterback like crazy. If this dude shows up, like I said, Michigan game is the one. He shows up, and our defense shows up with him. Boy, all you're going to hear is about Oklahoma. And at that point, I do want to hear about Oklahoma. But right now, just let us be the ones that sell the hopium.
That's right. That's right. We're going to fly under the radar nationally, please, and locally, we'll get this figured out.
Exactly.
Who's not flying under the radar nationally? That's the SEC, because there's a lot of discussion about should SEC move to 9 conference games. What's the college football playoff format going to look like? Well, Brian Kelly of LSU made a big statement down there in Destin, Florida. We're going to discuss that coming up next here on Locked On Sooners. Thanks again for making Locked On Sooners your first listen every single day. Shout out to all the everydayers out there. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So, Jay, the discussion around the college football playoff format, a lot of it centers on the fact that the SEC only plays 8 conference games as opposed to 9 conference games like the Big 10, the Big 12, and the ACC. And yet, as much as everybody seems to think that the SEC is eventually going to budge on this, you listen to the coaches talk, the guys that are making the big money at these schools, and they don't seem to have a whole lot of interest in moving to 9 conference games. One thing that Brian Kelly said, though, is fascinating. He wants the Big 10. He's saying, like, let's create a scheduling agreement with the Big 10 to where we play one of them every year, and then we play 2 other non-conference games. That'll be fascinating. There's reports out there from Ross Dellinger that there's some interest there, but again, the Big 10 wants the SEC to go to 9 conference games to match what they do.
don't get that. To me, that just doesn't make any sense, right? Like the Big Ten can be at 9, which we totally understand why they're at 9. They've got like 30 teams in their conference, so it totally checks out that they need to find a reason to get a lot of people playing against each other because they've got a lot of teams that's going to like that's not going to interlap with each other, and they're going to end up with similar records. So you got to have some sort of odd number to help with being able to say, oh, you have more conference wins in comparison to this guy. We totally understand that. SEC really doesn't have that problem. You know, we're pretty solid over here when it comes to that. But I don't get why the Big Ten wants to do that. While at the same time, shout out to the long-standing members of the SEC in Oklahoma and Texas who have already been playing Big Ten teams, year after year. You know, Texas travels to Ohio State, and Ohio State will come back. They did a Michigan home and home. They got a Michigan home and home basically set up. Oklahoma's got Michigan coming to town. They'll go to Michigan, and then Texas and Michigan, and then Oklahoma's played Ohio State. Look, we have been the trendsetters for the conference already, which I love. Yeah. That's going to make so many people mad, and I have no problem with. I actually don't care. Y'all can be upset. I think it's fun and funny because Oklahoma and Texas have, especially Oklahoma, if there's one thing you can say about the Sooners, and I'll give it to Texas as well, is that neither have ever been afraid about going up against bigger competition in home and home series. Like Oklahoma, like Texas had Alabama set, and Oklahoma was going to play Georgia, but the SEC had them scrap that because the reciprocative game was going to be so far in the future that it was going to mess up with some of the scheduling stuff, and they wanted to make sure that Georgia got their share of the pie with Oklahoma going to town. So totally understand that. But both teams have always been willing to play against a lot of other tough teams. LSU similar too. They're willing to do it neutral site. I ain't seen them do home and home series yet, and that's what we need. Give me some home and home. Give me some campus stuff. Like, I enjoy neutral sites for, the holiday weekend because it's a long weekend. It gets people, a vacation thing to do for Labor Day and all of that. Totally understand it. But, John, 100%. I want campus games. Give me that. I want more campus games. But the SEC going to 9 in order to fulfill that, the request of the Big Ten. Shout out to Paul Sankey. He said this the best way of anybody. He said, why does the SEC need to keep giving these compromises? Maybe the compromises need to come out of other people instead of the Southeastern Conference. Because it feels like everybody's like, well, we want you to do this, you do this, you do this, you do this, without saying what they're going to actually compromise on their end. The Big Ten playing the SEC and non-cons would do nothing but make everybody money. Those are the games that we want to see. Now, granted, the question is who's going to play who, and there's always those possibilities that you'll see. Somebody posted this in the Georgia message board because Message Board's genius is over on Twitter, decided to repost it, thought it was hilarious, that you'll see Tennessee play Michigan, you'll see Georgia play against Ohio State. Alabama's going to get Purdue. Somebody else is going to get I don't know, your Rutgers.
Oklahoma gets Penn State.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's what you'll probably see. Yeah. And it's a funny joke on their part while at the same time, it's kind of truthful. I want to know who these bottom teams are going to play. To me, if you do it right, top teams play top teams, middle teams play middle teams, bottom teams play bottom teams, and you schedule it annually based upon results.
Yeah.
That would make it more fun. That's something that the fans would be excited about. It's similar to NFL scheduling, and I really hope we go to that direction here in the future.
Yeah, that's the thing that makes the most sense. The other thing that makes the most sense is the SEC just doing what they want to do. Why would they want to do it the same way as everybody else? They've created a situation where they're one of the most powerful conferences in college football doing it their way. Greg Sankey has created this situation in which the SEC is what everybody's looking to for change. And I get you want everybody to be at 9 conference games, but there's a reality here that not every conference is created equal. And we kind of have to move past this idea that the SEC and the Big Ten are the same. They're not. Or that the SEC and the Big 12 are the same. They're not. It's not the same. You look at what the teams that got left out of the playoff, what they lost, those 3 losses that they had. You look at South Carolina, Alabama, Ole Miss, those losses were in conference play. So do you need those teams to have another conference game? No, the strength of schedule is already pretty high. You don't have to have a stronger schedule if you're the SEC to create equity in scheduling. No, you don't need that. And like you mentioned, these teams are already playing tough non-conference. Oklahoma, last year they had, what was the Houston game? Like, listen, I get it's just Houston, but Houston's a Big 12 team. They'll play SMU in a few years. They'll play Nebraska in a few years. They've got Clemson on the schedule down the road. So it's not like these teams are shying away from games. And honestly, if you make them add a 9th conference game, there's a really good chance they are going to start shying away from those bigger non-conference games.
Yeah.
Lincoln Riley and USC are trying to do it every single year. They're trying to get games canceled, get games moved because they play 9 conference games and they don't want the smoke. Oklahoma will take the smoke. They want Nebraska. They want Clemson. They want to play these games. But if you look across the conference, will they continue to do those games if they have to have a 9th conference game? I don't know if that's going to be the case. They will schedule a P4 game, but it might be Rutgers or Northwestern or Cal or pick a random ACC, Maryland. Like, it's not going to be Clemson or Ohio State or Virginia Tech or Texas Tech, a big 12 team. They're going to start shying away from some of those things if that's what it's going to take to have schedule equity. Is you're not going to Ohio State. I'm sorry, you're not going to get to play Texas. Then you're not going to get to play Georgia in non-con. USC, you're not going to get to play LSU in non-con. That's all going to change. So be careful what you wish for. Be careful what you're asking for.
Yes, for a lot.
Because I think Brian Kelly is actually onto something here. It's like, leave it at 8. We'll just schedule the Big 10 every year. And you know what, Big 10, why do you need to be at 9 conference games? You can change. You can go back to 8 conference games, and you can get the same benefit that SEC has.
Actually, they probably need to stay at 9 because if you really think about it, with the way that they're so top heavy, you probably, if you keep it at 9 and add an SEC game, guess what? People want to ask questions. The biggest question last year was Indiana. And I mean, I totally understand why people were, pushing back at Indiana being a viable candidate to make the playoffs, but they did a decent job of playing against Notre Dame. It was 20-15. So the game wasn't a blowout. They just didn't control much of anything whatsoever. While at the same time, you add them an SEC game in there and they get that win, that 11-1 record looks a heck of a lot better. They didn't play a bunch of scrubs, but I mean, they did have Washington, who was solid. They, not good, but not great. They did have Michigan, who was good, not great. Michigan did beat Alabama in the bowl game very badly, unfortunately. That's 2 years in a row. They had the Ohio State game on the road, which is tough for anybody. We'll see if Texas can, overcome that. But they had a decent set of scheduled games on there. It's just people weren't impressed with who they played. And even though they won them most of them by blowout, you give them an SEC game and that gives them 10 out of their 12 being, not only a conference, but a tough opponent on the road. People may respect them more. And same thing on the SEC side. Maybe if, Alabama didn't play Mercer, which, I don't mind the FCS game. I think every team deserves to have 2 cupcakes on their schedule, not only to help fund those schools' athletic programs so that those programs can still exist, but it also gives you those warm-up games. It's basically preseason football, something you don't get in college.
Right.
That's the value of it. So I don't see why people get so upset about it. It's just when you have 4 of them on your schedule and it's like, okay, that's absurd. We need to get past that. 2, no more, then force everybody to play 10 at minimum P4 opponents. We'll be in good spots.
Right. If you want to tell me the SEC is going to stay at 8 conference games, but they're going to have 2 Power 4 opponents, that should satisfy everybody, right? Like, that should be more than enough, because that's what you're asking. That's really what you're asking for, Big Ten, is you just want them to have 2 Power 4 opponents. Because you look at Ohio State or Penn State's schedule, all right, a team that everybody thinks is going to be one of the favorites in college football. Their non-conference, Nevada, FIU, Villanova. Like, who is getting excited about any of those games? Nobody. Okay, you play Oregon, great. That's a really solid matchup. UCLA, Northwestern, Iowa, and then obviously the Ohio State game's huge. Then you have Indiana, Michigan State, Nebraska, Rutgers. Like, there's 2 games on Penn State's schedule that I'm getting excited for. Oregon and Ohio State. That's really it. They don't really have this schedule that's like,
they don't.
Oh my gosh, that's a meat grinder for Penn State. No, it's not. And they're going to be a playoff team at the end of the year because their schedule is pretty cheeks. I'm sorry, it just is. But then you want to talk about what the SEC teams are playing on their schedules, and to me, it just doesn't hold water. If you're talking the SEC doesn't have the same scheduling requirements, I'm sorry, you're missing me with that, because that Penn State schedule is not great. But that's going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Sooners. Thanks so much for tuning in, being a part of the show. Subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts for free and available on all podcast platforms and on YouTube. So hit that subscribe button and that notification bell to let you know when new episodes drop. Follow Jay at Unfair Sports. Go check out his channel, Unfair Sports, over on YouTube. You can follow me at John9Williams and read my work covering the Sooners over at SoonersWire.com. Lots of college softball happening over there right now, so go check it out. Ranked all of the uniforms in the Women's College World Series, so that was kind of fun. Hopefully you guys didn't take too much offense to that, but make sure you follow the show at Locked On Sooners wherever you like to do your social media stuff. But until next time, he's Jay Smith, I'm John Williams. Boomer Sooner.
Yeah, somebody's gonna fight you over those jerseys.
Oh yeah, totally.
Gonna happen.
Absolutely.
But it's okay.
Yep.
It's okay.
They'll hate me. It's fine.
Fight them.